today's video, we do have to take a look here at the tropics. We do have some interesting things going on. Both of our disturbances that we saw yesterday have pretty much dissipated. As you can see, though, we already have a new disturbance to be watching, and this one, as opposed to our most previous disturbance that we were talking about for pretty long, actually, this one is heading into much more favorable waters. As a rule of thumb, any storms that move into this southern Caribbean area are going to have a much more difficult time developing than ones that head into the northern Caribbean. So, with this one taking aim, as you can see, it is long range, so we'll need to really watch it closely. It does look to go potentially north of Puerto Rico, north of Dominican Republic, and maybe more in the direction of the Bahamas there, which tends to be much more sufficient for tropical activity. So this one has my attention a lot more than our previous ones do. We're going to be watching it closely here on the channel. As far as those percentages go, we do have a 0% chance over the next 48 hours. As you can see, it's very far east at this point. It is a long time to go before it moves into this kind of development zone, if you will, but we do have a 30% chance of development once this one does move into this area. So through the next 7 days, 30% chance of development, and we're going to be watching this one extremely closely. Now, let's go ahead and move on, talk about our upcoming storminess, okay? So already by this afternoon, we actually do have quite a bit of some storms flaring up for the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, and upper Midwest. As you can see, this is all kind of connected to this 998 millibar low pressure center that we do have in eastern Canada. Relatively strong for this time of year. Even this 1003 is a decent storm for this time of year. So we have multiple different pressure systems here at play. Our jet stream is still doing something similar to this. So we do see a little bit here of some flow to the south here with these storms. It is going to be very hot over the next couple of days. It's not necessarily a trough right now. And as you can see, very quickly, already by tomorrow evening, what we're pretty much seeing for the most part here is a lot of this type of a flow. So we're seeing this warm, humid air surge northward in the central there and the eastern United States here. And this is going to lead towards upper 90s at least for most of these areas. A lot of areas will be in the hundreds. Maybe some areas will be more towards the mid to lower 90s, depending on where you're at. But regardless, extreme heat is on the way. We can even see the flow of these storms kind of following here with the flow of that warm and humid air. So we do see some storms kind of elevating more from these tropical areas up the east coast. So that's going to be something to watch for. As we reach towards Friday here, the 28th, as you can see, we have these storms ongoing through the Rockies. More activity here for the northern plains, upper Midwest, Ohio Valley, and the Great Lakes there. And that is going to be another area to watch there. By the time we reach Saturday afternoon, what we end up seeing is a lot more activity further east and further south here. So we're going to designate kind of the Tennessee, North Carolina area as that very southern border of where we're expecting storms. But the further north you go up the coast, as you can see, the darker those greens get, the more storms that we're expecting in these areas. So especially around New England, an area that has had pretty sufficient storminess, if you will, maybe beyond that, obviously, this summer so far. They look to be the bullseye here for Saturday again. So more and more activity expected for these areas. By the time we're reaching into Sunday here, as you can see, we do have some thunderstorm activity across the southeast, maybe as far northward as the mid-Atlantic there, with the most of it being in Virginia and North Carolina here, as you can see, some up there in Florida, or down there in Florida, better yet, as well. And look, we continue to see this activity for kind of the Rockies up through the northern plains, so that is going to continue to be a more active area in this upcoming pattern. We do end up, by the time we're reaching early next week, reaching into a pretty interesting pattern where we have this deep ridge, pretty intense ridge here in the west, really flaring up again. So we see this type of a flow, and this is going to cause this cooler and stormier air to dive into the east here. So we start to get back into that type of a look for the very end of July here, and what we see is this storm system kind of diving down and wanting to ride towards the southeast along that jet stream. We still have some relatively common isolated thunderstorms here along the coast, and for Tuesday evening, what we end up seeing is a lot of thunderstorms again along those coastlines. So we see all the way up the east coast, down through the Gulf Coast, more thunderstorms possible in this area, and still very active in the plains and the Rockies. Very interesting. By the time we're reaching Wednesday the 2nd, we see some more storms riding along this bit of a jet stream here, down towards the kind of Midwest, Great Lakes, Ohio Valley area. That is something we're watching very closely. Thursday, August 3rd, we see pockets of this still ongoing here. So we see some of this here for the Ohio Valley, some more here for Eastern Canada, and that looks to potentially be a pretty common theme, obviously, through the next little while, and it honestly has been for a little bit as well. So this is going to kind of continue the way it's been going. By the time we're reaching Friday, which will be our final day here on this model run, we do have 1,005 millibar low pressure center right there. And as you can see, this may be associated with the cold front, or better yet, this cold front may be associated with this low pressure system. And that is leading towards some pretty intense thunderstorms potentially here for the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. And the reason I say potentially is because this is at the very end of the model run, so confidence is a little bit lower here. But I do see this as a pretty common occurrence through the next couple of weeks. If we begin to see more cooldowns, that is going to be a big factor. And honestly, we go from the very beginning to the very end of the model run with plenty of activity around the Rockies. So we continue to see this day over day over day, and it doesn't really come to an end yet, and we don't really know when it will. Total precipitation here, no surprise, is that we do see quite a bit of activity offshore of the east and onshore for Florida and Georgia, where this kind of tropical jet is really ramping through these areas a lot. Wouldn't be surprised if we see a bit of some tropical activity trying to develop along these more active areas over the next 10 days. They're not really indicating that as of right now, but this time of year is something you have to watch when we have a lot of storminess in a certain area like that. In very favorable waters, it is something that needs to be watched. And then for the most part, this little pocket here is going to be another area where we're watching for some pretty frequent storms to move through and bring above average precipitation for the next 10 days. Areas in the Rockies will be probably around average to below average there. And then for areas in the south central, as you can see, a little bit dry. So hot and dry, no precipitation really expected there. And then for the mid-Atlantic, a majority of the mid-Atlantic down through the deeper south, we actually experience below normal precipitation for most of these areas. Unless you're in the yellows or reds there is a couple spots in there. We're really experiencing average to below average precipitation for many folks within this circle. Now, let's just take a quick look here at that temperature pattern. Spoiler to the end, we do have some cooler air, but that lasts only about a day. This is when that major heat wave moves in. So these areas is going to be when we're potentially hitting 100 degrees for a lot of folks, upper 90s, mid 90s for most everybody, especially here in these reds. Notice just to the north of this, we do have this kind of really cold air. So I'm going to do negative for cold air, positive for hot air here, and what we end up seeing is that this is trying to move southward, and we're probably going to see this warmth kind of recycle back up the west coast, and that would create another cool down for the east. And yeah, sure enough, that is exactly what ends up kind of happening. We see this warm air, it was kind of flat. It really recycles, like I mentioned before, back towards the west, and this allows for this cold that was here to funnel back into this area. So you can see how it kind of flows and interacts with each other, and it all kind of just rotates in a clockwise motion there, and makes the cold dive south, warmth surges northward. We still have a bit of a negative PNA perhaps here, which is interesting, but that just goes to show that that doesn't absolutely have to be there for cold air to enter into the east, because sure enough, we see it here on this frame, and there is a negative PNA. Over time, what we end up seeing is that the west begins to warm up. So this is by time reaching about August 5th. We are seeing a positive PNA develop. More neutral to below normal temperatures here for a lot of the north in the central and eastern United States. And then we see actually some warmth, more than normal even, for areas in the deeper south. So that is kind of the look here. But we continue to see a cooling trend again for a lot of these northern areas, and they're looking even cooler than before, and a little bit more neutral with this PNA. So I think there's a lot of time that needs to go by, and we'll know a lot more here. But we're watching particularly these areas for warmth here, particularly these areas for cooler temperatures. And then over here, it's just a roller coaster. We see warm up, cool down, warm up, cool down. So definitely some interesting things, but it is something that we need to kind of track moving forward, and we'll know a lot more. Pretty much the entire United States, though, does go back and forth at certain points, so I think that is worth mentioning as well. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe, as we do upload every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload. Be sure to also like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.